are speaking to Professor Dave Chadee of UWI St. Augustine, a parasitologist and entomologist, who is the Anthony N. Sabga Caribbean Awards for Excellences Laureate in Science and Technology for 2013. Professor Chadee, you are a parasitologist and an entomologist. These aren't really fields that we normally hear about or which are celebrated. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay, well, let's start with entomology. Entomology is the study of insects and insect behavior, ecology, and dynamics. When I say dynamics, I mean the interaction within the ecosystem or within the environment. And some people actually specialize in different areas. Some people are taxonomists, so they will identify the actual insect. There's some people who study forest entomology, insects that affect forests and trees. Then there are social insects, the wasps and the bees, the beehives and stuff like that. Those people would then specialize in that area. But I selected very early medical entomology.
Okay.
So I deal with insects that are related in the transmission of disease and vector-borne, so it's called vector-borne diseases.
Okay.
So that's the entomology. Parasitology is a study of parasites or it's organisms that are really intracellular. So they are like malaria parasites. These parasites can cause damage to tissue. Again, there are different fields of parasitology. There's medical, there's veterinary, and there are also other allied areas where you can then look at parasitological immunology, parasitology techniques, and on the molecular approach. So there you deal not with the whole organism, the whole parasite, but rather little gene sequences of the parasites. So it's quite an array of studies that can be done when you amalgamate both entomology and parasitology. And with the new techniques, the medical techniques that are coming on, it's even more exciting because you no longer have to go out in the field and collect specimens every day, but you can bring them in and do a lot of laboratory studies using molecular approaches.
Okay, that's the scientific.
Yes.
That's the scientific explanation. But this parasitology and entomology, or study of particularly mosquitoes, has an impact on the real world that we live in every day.
Sure.
Tell us about your studies of dengue, which are of great importance to not here, but perhaps some places like in Malaysia, where
Yes.
it's still very much a problem.
Okay. Well, with respect to, that falls within both entomology, parasitology, because it's a virus, and the virus is transmitted by the mosquito. So you need to know the behavior of the mosquito that will then lead to transmission of the disease. In a particular sense, malaria is a parasite as opposed to dengue being a virus. In malaria, the mosquitoes are quite different from the mosquito species that transmit dengue. So when a lot of people, when they see mosquitoes, they say a mosquito is a mosquito. But in our area, we need to actually identify that it's the Anopheline mosquitoes which transmit malaria parasites, as opposed to Aedes aegypti, which transmits dengue and yellow fever. Right. So there's a great difference. And the ones that you hear ringing in your ear at night, those are called Culex quinquefasciatus, and those are associated with elephantiasis or filariasis, which is Bigfoot, which was a disease of many, many years. It occurred in Trinidad, but it has fortunately been eliminated. And we got certified a few years ago from lymphatic filariasis. So those are the kinds of mosquitoes that transmit different kinds of parasites. So I have, over the years, been dealing with these three parasites and these three mosquito vectors.
Your work has heavily impacted on public health policy in Trinidad. Tell us, now, first of all, you worked with the Ministry of Health for 20 years and essentially used that time to collect a lot of data. So let's start from there. Tell us a little bit about your time at the Ministry of Health.
Well, I think I can say this, that every time that I've gotten a job, somebody has taken a chance on me. And the Ministry of Health took a chance on me, having just completed an MPhil degree. And I started there, and I was just about 21, 22 years old. And lots of the older guys in vector control, they called me, "Who's this young little boy?" And soon I had to gain their respect. And the only way to gain their respect was really to start doing cutting edge and operational research that would change the way they thought, the way the programs were being planned. So I went on systematically doing operational research and changed many aspects of the eradication program. At that time, they were onto the Aedes aegypti eradication program and the lymphatic filariasis program. So we essentially changed the strategies. It was the first time that the research that I did discovered that the truck-mounted ULV was not very effective because of physical barriers.
Right.
When you had read the literature, they said, well, it's very effective because it penetrates into the houses. And so I put in little cups with mosquitoes into houses and had the trucks spray. And there wasn't any penetration into the houses. It wasn't killing the mosquitoes. So then I realized it was the fence, the physical barrier. So as the spray hit the walls, it just went straight up into the atmosphere. And therefore it was not getting into the houses. And so the impact was not there. So I wrote this paper up, and I was explaining that this is very different. Then I did some work on the actual insecticides that they put into the potable water, into drums. The literature was saying it would hold for like 3 months. I found it was only holding for 1 week. And so, again, the program was planned with a 3-month cycle because the insecticides were supposed to hold for that period. And when I say hold, I mean that it would kill any mosquito larvae or immatures that are in the water. So I've then found the explanation was the dilution, because rain will be diluting rainfall from the eave guttering would actually be going into the drums, for example, and will be actually diluting the active ingredient in those containers. And so they had lost the ability to kill because of the dilution factor. Also, householders using it and refilling it would also dilute. So this changed the program dramatically. So the main attack for the Aedes aegypti mosquito was focal treatment. And all of a sudden, the strategy that was designed for 12 weeks was only effective for 1 to 6 weeks. And the truck that was supposed to be killing the adults wasn't killing the adults. So we had to make some dramatic changes, program changes.
So you worked with the Ministry of Health for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
You went on and got your PhD. How many papers did you publish while you were at the Ministry of Health?
Over 100.
Over 100 papers in, of course, peer-reviewed scientific journals and so on.
I've never written anything other than peer review.
Okay. So you published 100 papers, and then you decided, Dr. Rohit Doon said that this had a tremendous effect on the public health policy of Trinidad. So I imagine it wasn't just those two things, it was a range of things. Could you tell us some of the things that in public health policy that you had to change?
Well, it's the first thing is that the anti-litter, with respect to vector control, when people start talking about source reduction, which is the systematic reduction of containers that are liable to breed mosquitoes, and they say, well, it's going to be part of the Anti-Litter Act. The people's perception of what litter is and what the Ministry of Health would like people to actually remove are two different things. So you develop a program, for example, and you say, well, we're going to have a cleanup campaign in this county, and we would like you to bring out all your containers that are liable to breed mosquitoes. Instead of them bringing out the old drums and cans and pans and old buckets, they bring out beds and mattresses and stuff like that. And so all of a sudden, these source reduction programs were just not effective because it was just not targeted.
They became garbage disposal.
Disposal, yeah.
Yes.
So so we had to now have a targeted vector control approach. So that changed that policy, that we no longer could rely on the householders removing garbage because they thought it was the old traditional way of actually removing the old beds and old mattresses that it would get, the old fridges and stuff like that. So that essentially changed that policy. They also changed the applications for spraying. When the program was started, we were spraying all the houses, and we then had a lot of objections, and so we had to redesign strategies for institutions. So, and we have to appreciate that these operations are intrusive. You have to get into people's houses, and a lot of people are not willing. And it's even worse today than it was in 1979-80, when we were designing these programs. And so we came up with what is now called the closed house index, where we are now able to actually determine the number of closed houses that may be positive. So those kinds of policies, how do you deal with closed houses? We had to change the policy of working 9 to 5, 5 days a week, to do Saturday work, because householders are, going to work like everybody else.
So we're looking at very practical things, very practical, common sense things. But clearly you were progressing as an academic. And after 20 years, you had done your PhD at Dundee University. You then moved into academia at UWI St. Augustine. Tell us what it's like. Tell us what you do there at UWI St. Augustine.
With respect to my teaching, I teach first year biology, which is probably the most exciting and challenging thing, because we get on average 375 to 400 students coming into this big auditorium, and I have to teach them, and it's the first month, so we try to make them as enthusiastic as possible, to keep that enthusiasm from high school into in their transition to the university. So that's the first course that I teach. The second is parasitology. The third is ethics at graduate school level. And in the medical school, I teach for the Masters in Public Health program.
You were instrumental in introducing the Masters in Public Health program at UWI St. Augustine.
Yes.
How did this come about?
Well, this came about as a result of a friend of mine who became the director of the Sparkman Center at the University of Alabama. And we met at a meeting of tropical medicine and hygiene in New Orleans. And he said to me, he says, well, would UWI be interested in doing having a Master's in Public Health? And having completed one, I realized that there was a need for an MPH, or Master's in Public Health, at UWI St. Augustine. So I said, sure, I'll talk to the principal. And as life would have it, there was an occasion that I met the principal, and I mentioned it to him, and he says, yes.
So you're improving the quality of people who go into the public health service,
And,
like the
yes.
Ministry of Health.
Yes.
Yes. Now, this Professor Sankat, the PVC of UWI St. Augustine, said that one of the things that he was most impressed about you was your ability to create international connections. So you've done a lot of work for and with international institutions like the WHO, PAHO, the IAEA, and what was the other one?
IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about your international work.
Okay. The work that I've done with WHO is twofold. One is preparing documents for dissemination of information. At another meeting with WHO, we created essentially the blueprint for the elimination of lymphatic filariasis in the world, which has been ongoing now for the past 10 years. And a lot of progress have been made. And in our region in particular, Trinidad, Suriname, and Costa Rica have actually been declared free of lymphatic filariasis as a result of our work.
How did you get in touch, or how were you introduced to the IPCC?
Oh, the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, nominations are made by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. My nominations were actually sent to the IPCC, and I was selected as one of the lead authors at the Chapter 11, which is Health and Climate Change.
The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, that's a curious one. How came you to be involved with them?
Well, the mission of the IAEA is to actually use atoms for the benefit of mankind. Because in the past, everyone is associating atomic energy with atomic bombs and destruction, as opposed to something that would be building a society and for someone's health. So what they have done is to actually apportion some money for health and health benefits. So X-ray machines are part of their mandate. All those, the cancer treatment centers. So all of those radiation centers, they can get assistance from the IAEA. So we then came into this whole thing with mosquitoes and mosquito transmission. And I was starting to do some work on sterile male techniques, which would require male mosquitoes to be sterilized and then to be released. So that's one of the programs that they have funded. And because of the work that I've been doing, they then made me a consultant to 5 countries in the Indian Ocean, which is Mauritius, La Reunion, Seychelles, Madagascar, and Comoros.
How do you sterilize mosquitoes?
Well, there are 2 techniques. You could use chemostimulants, which is quite dangerous, or you can use radiation. So we've been working with the St. James Center, and they've been radiating our pupal stages, and we actually bring them into the laboratory, rear them to adults, and then we put them into cages with female mosquitoes, so that we then determine how effective they are in not inseminating females. And so we have had 85 to 90% success so far. So we have just constructed a new big cage that we are going to actually put it out on the campus, where we'll be doing a lot more of this work. We are now negotiating with the IAEA to get a technical support program, which will be through the Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of Health.
One of the things you said in an earlier interview is that your research isn't used a lot in Trinidad. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I will have to say that after the thing was aired, I got a call from the Chief Medical Officer.
This is the thing being where the vignette we did of you, where you said your work is hardly used in Trinidad. Yes. So yes.
Right, and I've had yesterday, I was walking in the parking lot, and another person said, can you come and help? So we have to thank your organization that they have actually highlighted that, there is information out there, and there are people who are willing to help. So
But till that time,
no,
your
not
research had not been used. Could
No.
you, again, tell us a little bit about... No, we're just talking about last week here.
That's right. Yeah.
So for the 20-something years before that, your research had not been used. So tell us a little bit about what research and why you think and who wasn't using it, who could have been using it.
Okay, well, I think most programs in the Caribbean region could have benefited from this, the strategies that are developed. Not only, well, I'll actually explain. There was a review of a program in Trinidad, probably it was around 1995 or close to 2000, when they were asking advice as how they can actually transform the program. And one of the persons, the experts that came, actually says, well, you shouldn't be asking us. I'm taking around this guy's papers suggesting to the whole region that they implement these strategies. And then it says, but the guy is right there. But that didn't make any difference.
Okay.
You know, so again, you had that kind of situation developing. I mean, but I mean, I'm happy. I prefer to look at the future. And since the future is, I've been asked to come to meetings, I think we have to look forward rather than backwards.
In your acceptance address, you spoke of Vidya Naipal's essay on Trinidad in the Middle Passage, his book. And in that essay, there's a part that says, people with talent in Trinidad are considered to be conceited. The society is very suspicious. And certain ways are found to manage and control. That tells me two things. One, that you read a lot. And two, that that little has changed. So tell me, first of all, what do you read and how does it affect your work?
Okay. I think it's that's a very interesting question. And it shows that our education system in the past was not created and developed in silos. That someone who is doing science doesn't only read science, but also read other things. And if we are moving in that direction, we may understand why scientists are not supposed to read these things, or that's a mindset. And that will keep us in that middle passage mentality. However, I read a lot of different things. I read books, novels. Every summer I read at least 6 novels. I write my papers, but I also make an effort to read as much as I can from other people. I've actually read your books. So these are the kinds, I read everything, and I believe in the philosophy of the shaping spirit of the imagination, which is Wordsworth. And we use, as scientists, the same creative juices as someone who is writing a book or a poem. So we need to have that imagination to kind of look into the future and say, what kind of methods, what kind of research, what kind of outcome we want. There's very little difference between the creation of a play as opposed to the creation of a scientific paper.
Who's your favorite novelist?
Do you really want? V.S.
V.S. Naipaul?
Yes.
Okay.
As arrogant as he is.
Okay. Well, he is always.
Yes.
And so let's just close off with, you have mentioned the term silos of education. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that and tell us, on a closing note, what you would like to see in the education system to transform it.
Well, I think we no longer have to teach students one discipline. We need to have the multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary approach where every student of art must know something about science, because science is what is driving the universe. We need the artists so that they can actually bring joy and comfort to us. So we need to really start approaching education or recreating that holistic education, the creation of the all-round student that was the paradigm in the 1950s and 60s. We need that kind of approach back into the education system where people, although you're a mathematician, you still read literature. You know, and I think that is where I think we are going to get the next generation of good citizens.